Standing in the dark hallway on our anniversary night, clutching the laundry bag, I froze as I overheard my husband telling his parents through the ajar kitchen door, "Once she clears my debts, I'm leaving her. She was never in my class." Instead of screaming, my blood ran cold. My accountant's instinct forced me to stay silent. I walked in flashing a gentle smile as I handed him a glass of water, then stayed up all night opening my laptop. A revenge Excel spreadsheet was officially established. This story starts quietly, but it won't leave you unchanged. Before we dive in, drop a quick comment. Have you ever had to document something to protect yourself? Yes or no? Your perspective might help someone else today. Quick note, some details are fictionalized for storytelling. The lesson at the heart of this story is what truly matters. I was exactly 30 years old the night my marriage ended, though it would take 6 more weeks of complex legal paperwork for the wheels of justice to confirm what I already knew standing frozen in that dark hallway, clutching a canvas bag of dirty laundry. Apartment 4B on Maple Street in Charlottesville was filled with the rich, savory aroma of herb-roasted chicken, the scents of rosemary and garlic intertwining perfectly. I had spent 2 full hours after work preparing a flawless dinner for our first anniversary roasted chicken, a bottle of premium wine and candles arranged meticulously on our small dining table. I was a junior accountant at Blue Ridge Transportation, the kind of person who balanced Excel spreadsheets during lunch breaks and believed absolutely that effort translated directly into results. I had applied that exact same mathematical logic to my marriage input care receive care back. The equation had seemed so simple to me, a balanced formula with zero margin for error. But Stellan Blackwell arrived at 9 o'clock 2 hours late, carrying a bouquet of convenience store carnations wrapped carelessly in crinkled cellophane. "Traffic was brutal tonight. The roads were completely gridlocked, babe," he said, kissing my forehead with the mechanical precision of someone checking off an item on a to-do list. He was 28, my husband of exactly 1 year, and the smile he gave me had actually died 90 seconds before he even walked through the door. "Everything looks nice, babe," he added casually, tossing the flowers onto the kitchen counter without looking for a vase. I forced down my disappointment and made my voice sound warm. "I'm just glad you made it home." "Oh, I told my parents to stop by later for a bit. Hope that's okay." The chicken was starting to dry out. The candles had burned halfway down, leaving long trails of hardened wax on the table. I could only nod in acceptance, quietly moving into the kitchen to reheat the scalloped potatoes. Wayne and Lorraine Blackwell arrived 15 minutes later. They walked in with the practiced warmth of actors who had perfected their performance over decades. Wayne, 56. Stellan's father and a retired factory foreman quickly filled the living room with easy laughter and boisterous jokes about his back-breaking years on the assembly line. He possessed the smug confidence of a man who believed he was far too clever to ever get caught doing anything shady. Lorraine, 55, lightly touched the back of my hand as I opened the door to welcome them. "You are such a thoughtful wife, dear. Stellan is truly lucky to have you." She sank into our second-hand armchair with a theatrical sigh, pressing one hand against her lower back. "My back has been killing me like a knife this week. Those medications are the only thing keeping me going, but they're just so expensive." I had heard about those expensive medications no less than 10 times before. I had also written checks for them no less than 10 times over the past year. "Let me make some tea for everyone," I said, finding an excuse to retreat into the familiar sanctuary of the kitchen. I served them at the dining table. Wayne dived into a long-winded story about a neighbor's fence dispute. Stellan laughed loudly at every punchline, and Lorraine smiled and winced in pain on cue. I watched the three of them silently from across the table. For the very first time, I noticed just how heavily choreographed their affection was. The way Wayne's jokes landed exactly when Stellan's attention began to drift. The way Lorraine's back pain flared up perfectly whenever the general conversation stalled. I looked around. I had painted this kitchen myself when we first moved in ivory white, because Stellan said it would make the small apartment feel more spacious. After tea, I excused myself to step out onto the small balcony to bring in the laundry. The November air was sharp, biting, and pure. I gathered the clothes into a large canvas bag and slowly walked back through the narrow hallway, the only path connecting the balcony to the living room. The kitchen sat halfway along that route. Its door was slightly ajar, and the voices inside were echoing out into the dim corridor. I stopped dead in my tracks. Wayne's voice came first, low, instructional, and patronizing. Leave the marks visible, a little obvious. Women like her have a natural tendency to blame themselves first. It creates the perfect psychological pressure. My hands tightened around the opening of the canvas laundry bag. Lorraine's voice came next, nonchalant and matter-of-fact, like a salesman reporting a successful deal. This month's medication money came through right on schedule, not a penny short, 1,200. I stood as still as a statue. I didn't even dare to breathe heavily. A few seconds later, Stellan's voice rang out clear, relaxed and carefree, the way someone talks about casual weekend plans. She thinks we're building a future together. As soon as the last debt is cleared, I'm packing my bags. She was never my class. The hallway was pitch black. No one in the kitchen could see me standing there in shock. The heavy laundry bag in my hand suddenly felt weightless. My legs lost all sensation, as if gravity had vanished. The walls of the apartment hadn't moved a single millimeter, but the entire architecture and foundation of my life had collapsed into a single moment of absolute brutal clarity. They weren't being careless. They weren't being impulsive. This was a systematic plan, a meticulously calculated strategy. The late arrivals, the cheap convenience store flowers, the requests for medication money, even the lipstick stains I had found on his shirt collars 3 times before, stains I had naively excused as accidental marks from coworkers or clients. Now I understood that they were deliberate traps, designed to make me doubt my own judgment and sanity, while they silently bled my bank accounts dry. I stood in that hallway for what felt like a century, but the wall clock showed it had only been about 90 seconds. My hands did not shake. My breathing remained perfectly steady. I was an accountant. I understood structural patterns. I knew how to identify when numbers couldn't be reconciled or when cash flows didn't add up. And standing there in the dark with those whispered voices filtering through the kitchen door, I understood that this marriage had been a transaction from the very beginning. A cold business arrangement with a predetermined expiration date tied to debt clearance and an exit strategy. The world around me hadn't changed color. Only my understanding of the people standing in it had transformed completely. I slowly walked back to the living room, making my footsteps sound regular and calm. The canvas laundry bag hung loosely from my right hand. My face easily adopted the pleasant, slightly tired expression I had worn all evening, the perfect look of a woman who had worked hard all day, cooked a nice dinner, and was now winding down for bed. Stellan was sitting on the sofa, his fingers scrolling rapidly through his phone. Wayne had moved to the window, staring down at the empty street below. Lorraine was busy adjusting her coat, getting ready to leave. "Babe, can you grab me a glass of water?" Stellan called out loudly without bothering to look up at me. "Of course," I replied. I placed the laundry bag neatly in a hidden corner near the hallway entrance. I stepped into the kitchen, their kitchen, the one where they had just outlined their entire exploitation of me in casual, confident detail. I turned on the tap and filled a glass with cold water from the filter. I brought it out and placed it gently on the small side table right next to Stellan's phone. "Thanks, babe," he said, his eyes still glued to the screen. Wayne and Lorraine said their goodbyes with the same fake warmth they had brought in. Lorraine hugged me tightly at the door. Wayne patted my shoulder, telling me to take good care of his precious boy. I smiled back, my eyes full of obedience, and promised that I absolutely would. When the heavy front door clicked shut behind them, Stellan stretched out fully on the sofa and let out a long yawn. "Well, that dinner went well, didn't it?" he remarked. "Yes, very well," I agreed. A minute later, he called my name, reminding me to turn off the hallway light before coming to bed. I turned toward his voice with the smile still fixed perfectly on my face. For the first time in our 1 year of marriage, I realized I was performing. And I had to admit, I was a magnificent actress. The performance continued through dinner. I sat at the table with my husband's family and watched them, the way an accountant reviews a ledger she suspects has been falsified for months. Every gesture had new meaning now. Every laugh felt rehearsed. Wayne told another story about a coworker who had botched a simple repair job, gesturing with his fork for emphasis. I smiled at the punchline. Stellan refilled his father's wine glass without being asked, the dutiful son. Lorraine complimented the chicken twice, touching my hand across the table. "You're such a blessing to our son, Saskia," she said, her voice warm and practiced. "We couldn't have asked for better." "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." It didn't. Stellan's hand found my shoulder, a proprietary touch that looked affectionate from the outside. I leaned into it slightly, the way I always had, because that's what the performance required. Wayne raised his glass. "Happy anniversary, you two. Here's to many more years." I lifted my glass and smiled. Stellan kissed my temple. The candles burned lower. Lorraine shifted in her chair and pressed a hand to her lower back with a small wince. I watched her fingers, no hesitation, no searching for the sore spot. She placed her palm exactly where it needed to go for the performance, the way an actor hits a mark on stage. Then she reached for her water glass, with the same hand gripping it firmly, no tremor, no stiffness. The back pain wasn't real. It had never been real. I refilled her glass without comment. "You're so thoughtful," Lorraine said. "Of course," I replied. The dinner lasted another 40 minutes. I cleared plates when appropriate, laughed at Wayne's jokes, asked polite questions about their week. Stellan squeezed my hand under the table once, perhaps mistaking my composure for contentment. I squeezed back. When they finally stood to leave, Lorraine hugged me at the door. Wayne clapped Stellan on the shoulder and told him he'd done well. I wondered if he meant the marriage or the extraction. "Drive safely," I said. "Thank you for coming." "Wouldn't have missed it," Wayne replied. The door closed. Stellan locked it and turned to me with a tired smile. "That went well," he said. "It did," I agreed. He pulled me into a brief hug, kissed my forehead, and yawned. "I'm beat. Don't stay up too late, babe." "I'll be there soon." He disappeared into the bathroom. I heard the shower start, the familiar sound of water hitting tile. I stood in the living room for a moment, looking at the dining table, the half-melted candles, the wine glasses with dark red residue at the bottom, the wilted carnations still sitting on the counter in their cellophane wrapper. I had hosted this family for 12 months, believing hospitality was love, when it was actually a fee for their silence about my expiration date. I cleared the table slowly, stacking plates with precision, pouring out the remaining wine. Stellan's voice drifted from the bedroom, muffled and relaxed. "Love you." "Love you too," I called back. I didn't mean it anymore. By the time I finished washing dishes, Stellan was asleep. I could hear his breathing from the kitchen, deep and steady, the sound of someone unburdened by guilt. I dried my hands on a towel and walked to the bedroom. He lay on his back, one arm thrown over his headphone, charging on the nightstand. The man who had stood in a kitchen an hour ago discussing my exploitation like a business transaction now looked peaceful, innocent. I sat at the small desk in the corner of the bedroom and opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the darkness. I created a new Excel file and titled it, "What I Paid, What He Said." My fingers moved across the keyboard with the muscle memory of someone who had spent years building spreadsheets for other people's finances. Now I was building one for my own. I started typing from memory. Car loan $28,000. Stellan had asked me to co-sign 3 months into the marriage, claiming his credit wasn't good enough yet. I had believed him. The payments came from my account every month. Medication, $1,200 monthly. Lorraine's back pain, the prescriptions she couldn't afford on a fixed income. I had written those checks without question 12 months in a row, $14,400 total. Business loan, $45,000. Stellan's real estate venture, the one that would make us financially secure. He'd promised to pay me back within 6 months. That deadline had passed 4 months ago. Utilities split evenly, or so he'd said. I reviewed my bank statements in my head and realized I'd been paying 70% for the last year. Another $800. Rent I paid 2/3 because I made more. Except I'd later discovered Stellan had received a raise 6 months ago that he'd never mentioned. Another $3,000. The list grew. Each line was a memory, a conversation, a moment when I'd said yes because I believed we were building something together. Accountants don't cry over discrepancies. We document them, trace the pattern, and correct the balance. I added the final sum at the bottom, $89,400. 12 months. $89,400 extracted while he planned his exit. Stellan snored softly behind me, undisturbed. I sat back in the chair and stared at the screen. The number was larger than I'd expected, though I shouldn't have been surprised. That was the thing about systematic theft, it accumulated slowly, each transaction small enough to justify, large enough to matter. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I typed one more line at the bottom of the spreadsheet. Amount owed $89,400. Collection method TBD. The cursor blinked after those three letters. TBD. To be determined. I wasn't planning a confrontation. I wasn't planning to cry or beg or ask why. I was planning something colder, more precise. I was planning to collect what I was owed with the same systematic efficiency they had used to take it. I saved the file and closed the laptop. The bedroom was silent except for Stellan's breathing. I looked at him one more time, the man who thought he'd married someone too trusting to check the numbers, too kind to demand an accounting. He was wrong. I closed the laptop at 3 in the morning and looked at the man sleeping beside me, snoring peacefully, certain I knew nothing. The spreadsheet was saved. The numbers didn't lie. I had never felt more awake in my life. 4 hours of sleep hadn't dulled the clarity. The phone rang at 7 in the morning while I stood in the kitchen making coffee. Stellan was still asleep, the bedroom door closed. I answered on the second ring. Saskia. The voice was male, unfamiliar at first. Then I placed it. Rhett Ramsey, 28. One of Stellan's oldest friends from college. We'd met at the wedding. He'd been at the anniversary gathering last night, though I couldn't remember seeing him after the initial greetings. Rhett, I said, is everything okay? I need to tell you something about last night. His voice carried weight I'd never heard from him before. Guilt, maybe, or the particular exhaustion that comes from carrying a secret too long. I was there, in the hallway. I heard what they said in the kitchen. I set down my coffee cup carefully. The kitchen counter felt cold under my palm. What did you hear? Everything. He paused. The medication money, the exit plan, the class comment, all of it. I waited. Silence is often more effective than questions. I should have said something months ago, Rhett continued, but I didn't know how, and I kept thinking maybe I'd misunderstood or maybe it wasn't as bad as it sounded. Then last night, I was walking back from the bathroom and I heard Wayne coaching him about the lipstick strategy and Lorraine talking about the payments and Stellan. His voice cracked slightly. Stellan saying you were never his class. How long has he been planning this, Rhett? I don't know the full timeline, but Clara, he stopped himself. Sorry, Saskia. He calls you Clara sometimes when you're not around. He's been telling people you'd be done paying everything soon. That's just a few weeks from now. 6 weeks. Not distant future, not years, 6 weeks. The timeline snapped into focus with the precision of a deadline on an audit report I'd been too close to see clearly. Thank you for calling, I said. What are you going to do? I haven't decided yet. That was a lie. I'd decided at 3 in the morning when I typed the words collection method TBD. I just hadn't finalized the methodology. If you need anything, Rhett said, a witness statement, testimony, anything, I'll do it. I'll remember that. I hung up and stood in the kitchen for a long moment. 6 weeks. Spring. The last debt clears. The exit date had a calendar square now, not just a vague future marker. I drank my coffee, showered, dressed for work. Stellan was awake when I emerged, scrolling through his phone in bed. Morning, babe, he said without looking up. Morning, I'm heading out. Love you. You too. The lie came easier each time. Blue Ridge Transportation's office sat in a low brick building off Route 29. I arrived at 9:30, parked in my usual spot, and walked through the glass doors with the same expression I'd worn for 12 months. Professional, pleasant, unremarkable. Faye, my colleague in accounting, looked up from her desk when I sat down. Morning, Saskia, coffee? Already had 3 cups, thanks though. She laughed. Anniversary celebration run late. Something like that. I opened my computer and pulled up the day's expense reports. Fuel receipts, maintenance invoices, payroll adjustments. Numbers that needed reconciling, patterns that needed verification. The work I'd been doing for 2 years, the work I was good at, the work that had taught me to spot discrepancies others missed. No one in the office knew what I'd learned the night before. No one could see the sleepless calculation behind my composed expression. The phone on my desk rang at 10 o'clock. Blue Ridge Transportation, Saskia speaking. Good morning, this is Greenfield Pharmacy, calling to confirm the standing order for Mrs. Lorraine Blackwell's medication delivery. We have you listed as the payment contact. I straightened in my chair. Yes, that's correct. The prescription is due for renewal this week. Monthly charge of $1,200. Would you like us to process the usual payment method? Can you tell me the medication name? There was a pause, the sound of keys clicking. Let me pull up the file. It's listed as Vitaplex Supreme 60-day supply. Looks like it's been on standing order for 12 months. I opened a browser window and typed the name into the search bar. The results loaded immediately. Vitaplex Supreme. High-end vitamin supplement. No prescription required. Available at any drugstore for $40 per bottle. Not a medication for chronic back pain. Not a treatment for debilitating illness. Not anything a doctor would prescribe for intensive care. Vitamins. 12 months times $1,200? $14,400 for vitamin supplements while performing disability. There's a clean kind of disgust that comes when you discover fraud, not hot anger, but the cold precision of correction. Ma'am, the pharmacy employee said, should we process the payment? I'd like to cancel that prescription effective immediately, I said. Oh, may I ask if there's a problem with the service? No problem, just no longer needed. Understood. I'll note the account is closed. Have a good day. I hung up and sat very still at my desk. Faye was on a call 3 feet away laughing about something with a client. The office hummed with normal activity, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the coffee maker gurgling in the break room. I opened my personal files and pulled up the spreadsheet. The total was still correct. The medication money had always been part of the calculation. I'd just confirmed what I already suspected. Lorraine wasn't sick. She'd never been sick. The back pain, the medication needs the $1,200 every month, all theater designed to extract $14,400, while I believed I was helping family. I typed a new note in the details column. Mother-in-law medication, $1,200 monthly times 12 equals $14,400. Not sick. Vitamin supplements. Destination unknown. Then I added a new column header at the top of the spreadsheet right after the amount column. The header read, Who knew? Under Stellan's name, I typed Planned it. Under Wayne's name, Coached strategy. Under Lorraine's name, Performed disability. Under Rhett's name, Witness November 15th, Guilt called November 16th. I saved the file and closed it. The question wasn't just what they'd taken. The question was, who had been watching them take it? Who had known who had participated? And who might be willing to testify when the time came? I updated the spreadsheet. The total was now $89,400, and I added a new column, Who knew? Knowing who participated was half the equation. Proving it required professional help. I had searched for investigators online at 3 in the morning while Stellan slept beside me. By noon the next day, I was sitting in my car in the back corner of the Blue Ridge Transportation parking lot with $800 cash and a handwritten list of 5 questions that would either confirm systematic betrayal or make me look paranoid. The knock on the passenger window came exactly at noon. Brent Wolfe was 40 years old, licensed private investigator with 15 years documenting the kind of systematic deception I needed proven. He slid into the passenger seat without preamble, no handshake, no small talk. I appreciated the efficiency. You have documentation already, he asked. I handed him the folder. Inside Stellan's photo from our wedding, his real estate office address, his license plate number, copies of loan documents with his signature, and the typed list of questions. Brent scanned the pages. Asset tracking, communication patterns, financial transactions, third-party involvement. He looked up. This is thorough. You're not guessing you already know something. I need documentation, I said. Photos, financial transactions, anything that can stand up in court. How long do I have? 6 weeks, but I'll need updates weekly. He nodded, pulled out a standard contract, and slid it across the center console. I signed it. Then I reached into my purse and removed an envelope containing $800 cash. The money came from a shoebox in the back of my closet behind winter boots Stellan never touched. I'd been adding $20 here, $50 there for 3 months without knowing why. Grocery change, the occasional cash tip, small amounts that didn't register in our joint account tracking. Now I knew why my subconscious had been preparing. Brent took the envelope and counted quickly. This covers the first week. I'll send photo updates via the encrypted email you provided. Nothing traceable to your personal accounts. Thank you. He opened the door, paused. Whatever you find out, it's going to confirm what you already suspect. People don't hire investigators hoping for good news. I know. He left. I sat in this car for another 5 minutes watching him drive away. Hiring a private investigator felt less like betrayal and more like finally reading the fine print on a contract I'd signed in good faith. The next evening, Stellan cooked dinner. This was unusual. In 12 months of marriage, he'd cooked perhaps 3 times always with visible reluctance. Now he stood at the stove making pasta with marinara sauce, a bottle of red wine already open on the counter, soft jazz playing from his phone. "What's the occasion?" I asked, setting down my bag. "No occasion." He smiled, the charming version that had worked on me for so long. "I wanted to do something nice for us. We should celebrate more." I recognized the performance now. I could see the strategy underneath romantic gestures timed to financial requests, affection deployed as leverage. The pattern was clear once you knew to look for it. "This is really thoughtful," I said, and meant none of it. We sat at the small dining table 20 minutes later. The pasta was adequate. The wine was decent. Stellan was attentive in ways he hadn't been since our early dating days, asking about my work, laughing at appropriate moments, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "I've been thinking about our future a lot lately," he said. I waited. "We've been working so hard carrying all these obligations." He swirled the wine in his glass. "But your bonus comes in 6 weeks, right? Early January." There it was. "That's right," I said. "What if we just used it to wipe everything clean?" His voice was casual, reasonable. "Pay off the debts, get ahead of everything, fresh start. Then we could finally breathe." I set down my fork carefully. "Which debt exactly?" He waved his hand in a dismissive gesture. "All of it. The car loan, the business expenses, everything. Just clear the slate completely." The car loan he'd asked me to co-sign for. The business expenses I'd been covering for months. The medications that weren't medications. The systematic extraction that totaled more than my annual salary. "That makes sense," I said slowly. Relief washed across his face so clearly I could have photographed it for evidence. He thought I'd agreed. He thought 6 weeks was enough time to position the final request, collect the bonus, and execute whatever exit plan Wayne had coached him through. He was accelerating his timeline, not knowing mine was tighter, faster, and funded by money he didn't know existed. The inheritance. Grandmother's trust set up 5 years ago to disperse on my 30th birthday. December 17th, my birthday, 4.5 weeks away. $340,000 arriving before the work bonus. Before Stellan's 6-week deadline, before he expected anything to change. He was calculating around the wrong number. "I'm glad we're on the same page," Stellan said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Me too." He kissed my forehead after dinner, satisfied we'd reached agreement. I cleared the dishes while he settled onto the couch with his phone, texting someone with quick, pleased movements. I stood at the kitchen sink washing plates and doing mathematics. 5 weeks to December 17th. 6 weeks to the work bonus he was planning around. Somewhere between those two dates was the deadline where Stellan intended to leave, and I intended to make that impossible. Brent would need 3 weeks minimum to gather evidence, 2 weeks to set up financial separations, 1 week buffer for unexpected complications, 5 weeks total. 35 days from tonight to my 30th birthday, when $340,000 would appear in an account Stellan didn't know existed, removing every ounce of leverage he'd been building toward. The water ran hot over my hands. Stellan laughed at something on his phone in the next room. I dried the last plate and placed it in the cabinet with precision. 5 weeks to build an airtight case with documentation, witness statements, and financial evidence. 5 weeks to separate accounts, secure assets, and prepare legal filings. 5 weeks to dismantle a systematic exploitation that had taken 12 months to execute. I turned off the water and looked at my reflection in the dark window above the sink. The woman looking back was someone I'd been becoming since the moment I stood in that hallway holding laundry, clear-headed, calculating and running out of time. He kissed my forehead that night, satisfied we'd reached agreement. I let him believe it. 5 weeks to the inheritance, 6 weeks to my work bonus. And somewhere between those dates lay the deadline where Stellan planned to leave and I planned to make that impossible. 5 weeks was enough time, barely. 5 weeks meant I couldn't work alone. Faye Mercer didn't ask why I needed help securing my finances from my own husband. She just squeezed my hand under the cafeteria table and said quietly that she'd always suspected something was wrong. We sat in the corner of the Blue Ridge Transportation cafeteria on Tuesday at lunch. Faye was 26, sharp-minded, the kind of colleague who sat 3 desks away and noticed things others missed. She'd watched Stellan's surprise visits to the office over the past year, the proprietary hand on my shoulder, the questions about my schedule that sounded affectionate but felt like audits. "I need help with something technical," I said quietly. "Something only another accountant would understand." Faye set down her sandwich. "How bad is it?" I told her enough. Husband planning to leave after I cleared his debts. 5 weeks until money arrived. Needed to secure accounts without him noticing. Her expression registered confirmation, not surprise. "I always thought something was off with him," she said. "The way he'd show up here and watch who you talked to. The way he asked about your bonus at the holiday party. I'd forgotten that. He'd made it sound like excited anticipation instead of financial reconnaissance." "How much time do we have?" Faye asked. 5 weeks. She nodded, already calculating. "We'll create a buffer account. Temporarily in my name, then transfer to your new personal account. He can't see the pattern if there's a step between." The best part of discovering systematic betrayal is realizing you're not the only one who saw the cracks. Someone else was just waiting for you to be ready to act. "After work today," Faye continued, "we'll set up a secondary email. Only use it from work computers, never home devices. If he's smart enough to plan this long, he's smart enough to check your email." "You think he's monitoring my devices?" Faye's look was gentle but firm. "If he's this calculated about money, he's calculated about information." She was right. I thought about my laptop at home, my phone that Stellan sometimes borrowed, the joint cloud storage he'd insisted would be convenient. We spent the afternoon at Faye's desk. She walked me through encrypted email setup, showed me how to route salary deposits through the buffer account, explained how to create paper trails that looked normal while building exits. He wouldn't notice. "You're going to get through this," she said when I left. I believed her. 3 days later, Saturday night at 9, I met Brent in a supermarket parking lot. He slid into the passenger seat and handed me a manila envelope. "I've got 12 photos and preliminary background," he said. "The timeline is consistent twice weekly for 3 months, always Tuesday and Thursday evenings." I opened the envelope. The photos were time-stamped clear enough for court. Stellan at an upscale restaurant with a blonde woman, mid-20s, elegant. Stellan opening a truck door for her, his hand on her back. The same truck appearing in multiple photos, the newer model I'd been making payments on for 11 months. "Who is she?" I asked. "Paloma Townsend, age 27. That's where it gets interesting." I looked up. Brent pulled out 3 typed pages. "She's the daughter of Vernon Townsend. Townsend Construction. Owns half the commercial properties in 3 counties, annual revenue exceeding $50 million. The scale shifted. I'd thought I was competing with another woman. I was actually competing with a construction empire and $50 million in annual revenue. Stellan introduced himself to Vernon's social circle 6 months ago as a successful real estate agent." Brent continued. "Paloma started appearing in his schedule 3 months ago. He's positioning himself for an upgrade." An upgrade. That's what I was, the current model being phased out for a wealthier replacement. "The truck in photo 6, I said. "Run her name through county records. Find out who actually owns that vehicle." Brent made a note. "I'll have that by Wednesday." "What story do you think he told her about me?" Brent hesitated. "Probably that you're his cousin, or a roommate, something that explains your presence without claiming a relationship." I set the photos face down on the passenger seat. My hands were steady. The anger was there, cold and precise, but it wasn't controlling me, I was directing it. "The timing matches his schedule," I said. "Tuesday and Thursday nights. My late shifts during month-end closings." "He knew your schedule," Brent confirmed. "Planned around it." Of course he did. Stellan was many things, but sloppy wasn't one. Wayne had taught him well, identify the target extract value exit before discovery. Except he'd miscalculated. He'd married an accountant who understood patterns, documented discrepancies, knew that systematic theft required systematic proof. "What else do you need?" Brent asked. "Financial connection between Stellan and Vernon Townsend's business, meeting records, contracts. I want to know if this is personal or if he's positioning for professional access too." Brent nodded. "It'll cost more." I pulled another envelope from my purse, $400 cash from the shoebox fund. "Weekly updates," I said, "and get me that truck registration by Wednesday." He took the money and left. I sat alone in my car dome light on, reviewing the photos one more time. Stellan opening the truck door for Paloma. his hand on her back. The way he looked at her with the expression I remembered from our early dates, attentive, charming, invested. The performance was the same, only the audience had changed. I placed the photos back in the envelope and started the car. 4 weeks and 3 days until the inheritance arrived. 4 weeks and 3 days to document everything, secure accounts, file paperwork, and ensure that when Stellan tried to execute his exit strategy, he'd find every door locked and every asset protected. I drove home in the dark with Brent's photos face down on the passenger seat. Somewhere across town, Stellan was probably telling Paloma what a burden his cousin was. The cousin story didn't matter Monday morning when I walked into Hugh Vance's office with evidence that would change everything. I placed Brent's file on Hugh Vance's desk at 9 o'clock and watched his expression change the moment he saw Paloma Townsend's name, not shock, but the careful calculation of a lawyer who's just realized his client's domestic dispute is also his largest business partner's nightmare. Hugh was 50 years old, a veteran divorce attorney whose corner office overlooked downtown Charlottesville. His reputation was built on discretion and precision. He picked up the first photo Stellan and Paloma at dinner and studied it for a long moment before setting it down. Then he reached the typed notes with Paloma's full identification. His hand paused on the page. "You know her," I said, not a question. Hugh looked up, his professional mask firmly in place. "Her father is my largest client. Vernon Townsend owns Townsend Construction. I've been his legal advisor for 15 years. The room shifted. I'd walked in thinking I was hiring a divorce lawyer. I just activated a legal alliance with one of the most powerful construction companies in Virginia. "That's either a problem or an advantage," I said. "It's leverage." Hugh leaned back in his chair, processing implications with the speed of someone who'd spent decades navigating exactly these kinds of complications. "If your documentation is accurate, and preliminary review suggests it is your husband has been systematically defrauding you, while simultaneously courting the daughter of a man who could destroy his professional reputation with a single phone call." He spread the photos across his desk like evidence at trial. Stellan opening the truck door. Stellan's hand on Paloma's back, the same vehicle I'd been financing. "You came to me with the domestic dispute," Hugh said. "You're leaving with something much larger." "How much larger?" "Vernon Townsend doesn't tolerate deception in his business dealings. He's certainly not going to tolerate someone deceiving his daughter." Hugh gathered the photos back into the folder. "Stellan picked the wrong family to deceive. What do you need from me?" "Everything." Hugh pulled out a legal pad and began writing. "Bring everything Thursday. Every document, every receipt, every text message, bank statements, loan agreements, medication, invoices, vehicle registration. I need a complete financial timeline showing systematic extraction." I'd walked into Hugh Vance's office that morning thinking I was hiring a divorce lawyer. I walked out realizing I'd just activated a legal alliance with one of the most powerful construction companies in Virginia. That night, Stellan went out with friends. I stayed home and opened the filing cabinet. I'd been looking at these documents as a wife for 12 months. Now I examined them as an accountant conducting a fraud audit. Business loan agreement, $45,000. Withdrawal date March 13th. The same day, Stellan had come home excited about a new client opportunity that would set us up for life. I pulled the bank statement. The money had moved into our joint account, then out again within 48 hours, to an account I couldn't access. Car insurance policy, only my name listed as insured party. Stellan had contributed zero to premiums despite driving the vehicle I financed regularly. 12 months of payments, 12 months of his name absent from legal responsibility. Utilities, mortgage, groceries, 100% from my account. I pulled 6 months of joint statements and highlighted every transaction in yellow. The pattern was undeniable. My deposits funded everything, while his income vanished to destinations he never explained. I typed each finding into the spreadsheet, updating the master documentation Hugh would review Thursday. Behind the lease agreement, tucked in a file folder I rarely accessed, I found something that stopped my methodical cataloging. Life insurance policy, in my name, beneficiary Stellan Blackwell. Date signed August 2025, 3 months ago. I didn't remember signing this. I pulled the document out carefully and read through the clauses. Standard coverage, standard terms, nothing unusual until I reached the accident provisions on page 4. Someone had underlined 3 specific clauses in pencil. Careful, deliberate marks. Night shift workers elevated risk category double payout. Single vehicle incidents covered under accidental death, no investigation required if police report confirms fatigue. Work-related stress documented over time qualifies for additional coverage. The clauses weren't just underlined, they were studied. Night shifts, single vehicle, fatigue. Someone had mapped exactly how an accountant's death could look accidental. I sat at the desk holding that policy and feeling my understanding of the timeline shift one more time. This wasn't just financial exploitation with a planned exit date. This was systematic positioning with multiple exit strategies, and one of those strategies involved me not being around to collect what I was owed. I thought about the last 3 months. August was when Stellan had started encouraging me to take on additional night shifts for extra money we could save. September was when he'd suggested I drive home after midnight closings instead of staying at Faye's apartment nearby. October was when he'd started insisting I was working too hard, while simultaneously praising my dedication to our future. The concern wasn't concern, it was documentation. Every text message saying, "Drive safe, you must be exhausted," created a trail showing he'd acknowledged my fatigue. Every conversation about my long hours established a pattern. Every time he told me I deserved rest while encouraging me to work more, he was building the narrative that would explain an accident. I picked up my phone and photographed every page of that insurance policy, every clause, every underlined section, every signature I didn't remember providing, but that looked enough like mine to pass cursory examination. Then I returned the policy to exactly where I'd found it, tucked behind the lease agreement filed in the folder Stellan thought I never opened. I added a new line to the spreadsheet. Life insurance accident clauses underlined, filed without my knowledge, August 2025. I saved the file and closed the laptop. Someone had read this document carefully. It wasn't me. The question was who had studied those accident clauses. Tuesday morning, I found the answer to a different question that made the first one even worse. I searched Paloma Townsend's social media at my desk while pretending to review expense reports and found the diamond ring photo posted March 14th, exactly 24 hours after Stellan withdrew $45,000 from the business loan I'd co-signed in good faith. The Instagram post showed a close-up of an engagement ring, princess-cut diamond intricate platinum band. The caption read, "He said he saved up for 2 years for this #blessed #future Marsmers." 217 comments. Friends congratulating. Family asking about wedding dates. Paloma's response to someone asking about the proposal, "He's been planning this since before we even met. Some men just know." I opened my financial files on the second monitor. Business loan agreement withdrawal date, March 13th, 2025. Amount $45,000. Destination account. Stellan's personal checking, the one I didn't have access to. One day. 24 hours between my co-signed debt appearing in his account and Paloma's ring appearing on social media. I zoomed in on the ring photo screenshot. It saved it with the file name evidence_ring_ March 14. Then I pulled up the jeweler's Instagram that Paloma had tagged in a follow-up post. Custom design, the jeweler's caption noted. 48-hour turnaround for special client. Special client who paid $45,000 cash on March 13th for a ring delivered March 14th. My loan, her ring, his timeline. I sat back in my office chair and did the mathematics that Paloma's friends apparently hadn't. 2 years of saving meant March 2025 minus 24 months. March 2023. I met Stellan in April 2024. We married November 2024. 2 years of saving was mathematically impossible, unless you counted the year before we met, which would mean he'd been planning to marry someone wealthy since 2023, found me as a financial vehicle in 2024, and executed the ring purchase in 2025, using my credit while courting his actual target. 2 years, he'd told Paloma. 2 years of careful saving. It was 12 months of my 4 a.m. alarm clocks paying his way into someone else's future. What he'd saved wasn't money. What he'd saved was receipts. I'd been too trusting to verify grocery runs that fed his lunch dates with her gas cards, that funded his drives to Vernon Townsend's social events, the phone upgrade he'd needed for work calls, that were actually coordinating a double life. I added a new line to the spreadsheet. Business loan $45,000 withdrawn March 13th. Paloma's engagement ring posted March 14th. 24-hour conversion of my debt to his courtship asset. At lunch, I sat in my parked car and called Brent. "I need you to verify something about an insurance policy," I said when he answered. "The accident clauses seem specific. Read me the exact language." I pulled up the photos on my phone and read him every underlined section. Night shift workers, elevated risk category. Single vehicle incidents, no investigation required if police report confirms fatigue. Work-related stress documented over time qualifies for additional coverage. The silence on the other end lasted 5 seconds. "Email me photos of every page," Brent said. Finally, his voice different, sharper, more careful. "I'll call you back in 2 hours. Stay in public places until then." He hung up. I sat in the car holding my phone. Stay in public places. The instruction registered like a warning light on a dashboard. Something critical had shifted from documentation to protection. 2 hours later, at exactly 2 o'clock, Brent called back. "The clauses are specific, Saskia." His voice was controlled but urgent. "Night shift workers, single vehicle incidents, fatigue-related crashes. These aren't standard coverage terms, they're targeting a particular scenario." "My schedule," I said. "Tuesday and Thursday nights. I get home at 1 a.m. on Route 29. Deserted rural highway, no witnesses. Easy to attribute to fatigue if something happened." The insurance wasn't backup planning. It was stage setting. He'd been orchestrating my potential death since August, one late-night drive at a time. "The policy was signed in August," I said, 3 months ago. "When did he start pressuring you to work more night shifts?" I pulled up my work calendar. The request emails from Stellan started appearing in August. "We need the extra money, babe. Your overtime really helps us get ahead. I'm proud of how hard you work for our future." August 15th, the same week the insurance policy was dated. "He signed this 3 months ago, right when he started pressuring you to work more nights." Brent's question wasn't really a question. "Yes." "Saskia, listen to me carefully. Document everything, but don't change your routine yet. If he's monitoring your patterns and you suddenly alter them, he'll know you're aware. Can you forward me those work emails?" "I'll send them now." "And talk to your lawyer, today. This changes the entire scope." I hung up and immediately called Hugh Vance. "I'm sending you photos of a life insurance policy," I said when he answered. "Stellan filed it without telling me. August 2025. The accident clauses are specific to night shift workers." I heard typing on Hugh's end, then silence as he opened the photos. 10 seconds passed. "The accident clauses," Hugh said finally, his lawyer voice precise and measured. "Combined with your night shift schedule on a deserted rural highway. Saskia, this isn't just fraud. This is—" He stopped himself. "This changes everything," he continued. "The timeline, the documentation, the urgency. We need to move faster than I'd planned." "How fast?" Another pause. "How soon can you leave that apartment?" The question hung in the cold November air inside my parked car. Not if, how soon? Because the man I'd married hadn't just stolen my money. He'd been positioning me to die conveniently on a Tuesday night drive home, probably after working late on a month-end closing, probably after he'd texted concern about my fatigue, probably with enough documentation to make it look like tragic accident instead of calculated murder. Hugh asked how soon I could leave the apartment. Hugh's question would be answered soon, but first, I needed to watch the manipulation strategy happen in real time. I watched Stellan place the shirt with dark red lipstick on its collar into the laundry basket. Wednesday night, not hiding it, not explaining it, just the casual movement of a man who'd been taught that visible betrayal makes insecure wives work harder to prove their worth. He walked past me carrying the evidence like it was nothing. "Long day?" I asked from the doorway. "Exhausting." He tossed the shirt into the basket without ceremony. "I'm going to shower." No explanation, no excuse, no hurried attempt to hide the stain or claim it was wine or makeup from a colleague's casual hug. Just placement and departure, the confidence of someone executing a tested strategy. I stood in the bedroom doorway and remembered Wayne's voice from that anniversary kitchen conversation, the words I'd overheard while holding laundry in a dark hallway. "Leave the marks visible. Women like that blame themselves first. Perfect pressure." This was it, the strategy in action. For 12 months, I'd found evidence lipstick on collars, receipts, and pockets, late nights explained with casual vagueness. Each time I'd felt that twist of insecurity, that question of whether I was enough, whether I should cook better meals or wear different clothes or work harder to prove my value. Each time I'd transferred a little more money, taken an extra shift, made myself smaller, trying to fill whatever space I thought I was failing to occupy. It wasn't carelessness, it was calculation. Stella never hid this evidence because hiding it would have been kind. Visible betrayal was the tool. My self-blame was the result. The increased financial extraction was the goal. I picked up the shirt after he entered the bathroom. Dark red lipstick deliberately applied, strategically visible. The same shade Paloma wore in every Instagram photo. I returned it to the basket exactly as he'd placed it. Wayne suggested the strategy. Stellan implemented the performance. Lorraine collected the payments. A production line where my insecurity was the raw material and their bank accounts were the finished product. I walked to the living room and added a new line to my spreadsheet. Lipstick manipulation strategy. Wayne's design, Stellan's execution, 12 months of engineered self-blame. The shower ran in this bathroom. Stellan was singing something off-key, relaxed, unburdened. A man confident his strategy was working. Thursday afternoon, I sat across from Hugh Vance in his office. He placed a printed photo on the desk between us. The image showed an elegant restaurant, warm lighting, 3 people at a corner table. Paloma Townsend, Stellan, and an older man with silver hair and distinguished features. The Instagram caption read, "Dinner with E and his lovely father, #blessed, #family." Posted 6 weeks ago, mid-October. Your father-in-law has been performing affluence in front of the Townsends, Hugh said, to validate Stellan's social standing with Vernon's family. Exactly. Hugh tapped the photo. Wayne Blackwell, October 12th. The same week you have documented him visiting your apartment asking for grocery money. I studied the photo more carefully. Wayne looked different here, confident, well-dressed, the posture of someone comfortable in expensive restaurants. No mention of fixed income or medication costs or the humble life he'd described at my dining table. That's Wayne, I confirmed. 6 weeks ago, he was sitting at my dining table complaining about rising prescription costs. While wearing what? Hugh asked. I zoomed in on the photo detail. Wayne's clothing was visible now. Pressed slacks, polished shoes, and a navy vest with brass buttons that caught the restaurant's soft lighting. The vest triggered instant recognition. I'd bought that vest thinking I was building family bonds. He wore it to audition for my replacement's family while spending my money on her ring. That vest, I said quietly. I bought that for him last Christmas, December paycheck. $120 because Lorraine said he needed nice clothes for church. Hugh leaned back in his chair. He's wearing your gift to convince Vernon Townsend that his son comes from means. The irony was so specific it almost felt designed. I'd purchased the costume for Wayne's performance as affluent father-in-law to wealthy contractor's family funding, the very deception meant to position Stellan as worthy of Paloma Townsend's inherited fortune. Can you keep this photo for the file? I asked. Already printed 3 copies. Hugh placed the photo in my growing evidence folder. One for you, one for my records, one for when we need to demonstrate systematic family conspiracy. I sat forward in my chair. I need a promissory note template, I said. Virginia law, enforceable. Hugh's eyebrow raised. For Stellan signs financial documents without reading when I organize them. Tax papers, bank submissions, insurance renewals. I prepare everything tab where he needs to sign, and he signs 6 places without checking. You're going to have him sign a debt acknowledgement without realizing. He never reads what I prepare, he just signs where I tab. Hugh studied me for a long moment, the kind of assessment lawyers do when deciding if their client understands what they're proposing. Then his expression shifted, not concern, but something close to professional appreciation. How much debt? He asked. $89,400, the exact amount I've documented. When will you have opportunity? He's meeting with the bank Friday about debt consolidation. He'll bring home paperwork and ask me to organize it for Monday submission. That's when I'll clip it in. Hugh pulled his legal pad closer and began writing. Virginia law requires specific language for enforceability. The acknowledgement must be clear, the amount exact, the signature witnessed or notarized for maximum strength. Can you draft something that looks like standard financial disclosure? I can draft something that will hold up in circuit court and look boring enough that he'll sign it reflexively. Hugh glanced up from his notes. This is good strategy. He taught me, I said. Systematic documentation, careful planning, exit strategy preparation. I'm just using his father's methodology. Hugh smiled, then genuinely smiled for the first time since we'd met. I'll have the template by tomorrow morning, he said. Enforceable, recoverable, and boring enough that he'll tab right through it. I asked Hugh for a promissory note template under Virginia law, and he smiled for the first time since we'd met. Hugh's template arrived Friday morning by encrypted email. Friday evening, Stellan provided the opportunity. Stellan placed a stack of financial documents on the dining table and asked me to organize them for Monday's bank submission the 11th time this year. He'd handed me his problems to solve, not knowing Hugh Vance's promissory note was already in my work bag waiting to be clipped onto page 7. "Can you organize this for me?" He dropped 23 pages onto the table with visible frustration. "The bank needs it by Monday." I picked up the stack and began sorting. Tax documents, bank statements, loan applications, debt consolidation proposals, the usual chaos of a man who accumulated problems faster than solutions. On page 7, I clipped Hugh's document. The promissory note looked exactly like every other financial disclosure form: dense paragraphs, legal terminology, official letterhead. The critical language was buried in paragraph 3. Debtor Stellan Blackwell acknowledges debt to creditor Saskia Travers in amount of $89,400 plus statutory interest under Virginia Code effective upon signature. I placed signature tabs at 6 positions throughout the stack, standard locations, nothing unusual. "Sign at the tabs," I said, handing him a pen. Stellan sat down and began signing. Page 3, page 7, page 11, page 17, page 20, page 23. 6 signatures in under 2 minutes, each stroke reflexive, habitual, trusting. He never read a single page. "Thanks, babe." He stood and kissed my forehead. "You're a lifesaver." I gathered the documents, carefully returned them to the folder. The promissory note now bore Stellan's signature 6 times over, legally binding under Virginia law, enforceable in circuit court, with statutory interest accruing from date of execution. 12 months of him asking me to organize his chaos, never imagining that the woman who filed his papers so carefully might one day file them against him. Saturday morning, I walked through the city park near the apartment. Rhett Ramsey was waiting on a bench near the fountain exactly as he'd texted. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from carrying weight too long. "4 years ago I caused an accident," he said without preamble when I sat down. "Driving drunk. Minor collision, no injuries, but I panicked and left the scene." Stellan was the only one who knew. He helped me file the insurance claim, made it look like parking lot damage. I waited. "Since that night he's been using it." Rhett's voice was quiet but steady. "Demanding I stay silent about the financial stuff with you, the affair with Paloma, the kitchen plotting with his parents. Any time I pushed back, he'd remind me about the accident, hit and run, criminal charges, career destruction. He's been blackmailing you for 4 years." "Yes." "Would you be willing to write it down?" I asked. "Everything he asked you to cover up." Rhett pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I already did. Notarized yesterday. Dates, specific conversations, the blackmail timeline. All of it." He handed me the envelope. I opened it and scanned the first page, detailed testimony, specific quotes, timeline matching every major extraction event I'd documented. "Thank you," I said. "There's something else." Rhett stood. "Someone who works with Paloma. She noticed things months ago. She'll meet you if you want." 2 hours later, I sat in a small downtown cafe across from a young woman Rhett introduced as Indy Stone. Indy was 24, administrative assistant at the real estate office where Paloma worked. She had sharp eyes and the careful manner of someone who'd been watching predatory behavior long enough to recognize its patterns. "I'm Paloma's assistant," she said. "I noticed something was wrong 3 months ago when he started showing up constantly, too often, too familiar." "What did you notice specifically?" Indy pulled out her phone. "He scheduled recurring appointments in our system. I manage Paloma's calendar. The pattern was obvious once you looked." She opened a screenshots folder and began scrolling. "Meeting entries, location, data, timestamps." "The location is listed here," Indy said, zooming in on one entry. I leaned forward. "Apartment 4B Maple Street, my address, my home." "He told our office you were his cousin staying with him temporarily," Indy continued. "Said the apartment was his, that you were between jobs and he was helping out." Paloma believed him completely. "The apartment I'd saved for painted ivory white, furnished with weekend trips to discount stores. He'd been using it as his stage while I worked night shifts to pay the rent." How many times? I asked. Indy swiped through the calendar screenshots. 17 documented appointments over 3 months, always the same time. She slid the phone across the table. I stared at the screen showing my own address displayed in Stellan's professional calendar. The entry read V My Place 9 p.m. Recurring Tuesdays and Thursdays. These are his appointment entries, Indy said. The time is always 9 p.m. He'd block 2 hours. Tuesday and Thursday, I said quietly. Those are my night shift nights. Rhett, sitting beside me, leaned back in his chair. His face showed understanding mixed with disgust. He brought her to your home, he said, 17 times over 3 months, while you were at work. I scrolled through the calendar entries. September through November. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 p.m. The apartment I'd made into home, chosen the paint color assembled. The furniture paid the rent on time for 18 months, used as backdrop for courting Vernon Townsend's daughter while I worked overtime to afford it. The V in the calendar entry stood for what? Vernon, visiting, victory. No, it stood for something simpler. It stood for the apartment being his place, not mine. In his calendar, in his mind, in the story he'd told Paloma, and the real estate office, the space was his territory where his cousin temporarily stayed. Not the home I'd created, and he'd borrowed access to through marriage. Can you send me these screenshots? I asked Indy. Already did. I emailed them to the address Rhett gave me this morning. Why are you doing this? I asked her. Indy's expression was flat professional. Because I watched him manipulate Paloma for 3 months with the same techniques I've seen before. And when Rhett told me about you yesterday, I realized he was running the same game on 2 women simultaneously. That's not romance, that's systematic exploitation. I looked at the phone screen one more time. 17 entries, my address, my night shift schedule mapped with perfect precision. Listed in his calendar as V My Place 9 p.m. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesday and Thursday, my night shift nights. The calendar entries showing my apartment as Stellan's meeting location went straight to Hugh Vance Monday morning, and by noon, everything had changed. Hugh placed Vernon Townsend's letter on his desk with the calm precision of a lawyer who'd just secured the kind of legal backing that turns domestic disputes into corporate liability protection cases, and I understood my husband had finally defrauded the wrong family. Vernon met with me Sunday, Hugh said, settling into his chair. He learned that Stellan systematically defrauded both you and his daughter. The apartment address was the trigger. Paloma had no idea she was entering a property you were paying for, while Stellan claimed to own it. I waited. Vernon wants full legal action against Stellan. Civil fraud, financial recovery, every charge we can make stick. His written directive is here. Hugh tapped the letter. Protect his daughter and insulate Townsend Construction from any business liability Stellan might have created by association. What does that mean for my case? All your legal costs are now zero. Townsend Construction is absorbing everything: filing fees, investigation costs, court proceedings, appeals if necessary. Vernon's exact words were, "Spare no expense in documenting this man's fraud." I'd hired Hugh Vance with $800 from a shoebox. Now I had the backing of a $50 million a year construction company. Stellan had played himself into checkmate. You walked into my office with a domestic dispute, Hugh said. You're leaving with the most powerful construction company in 3 counties backing you. Vernon Townsend doesn't tolerate people who deceive his family, and he's treating your case as protection of his business reputation. What happens next? Hugh leaned forward. Paloma needs to hear this from you, not from her father's lawyer. She's been operating on Stellan's narrative. She believes his version that you're a cousin who's resentful because he moved on with his life. The cousin story. The same lie Indy mentioned from the real estate office. She needs to understand she's a victim too, Hugh continued. Tomorrow afternoon, 2 p.m. I'll be there to mediate, but this conversation needs to be between the 2 of you. Both women need to understand you're parallel victims before we build the legal case. Will she come? Her father asked her to. She'll come. Tuesday afternoon at 2 o'clock, Paloma Townsend walked into Hugh Vance's conference room. She was 27, blonde from the investigator photographs, wearing professional attire and a wary expression. She looked like someone expecting confrontation with a problem she'd been told was resentful and difficult. Hugh stood. Ms. Townsend, thank you for coming. Paloma's eyes found me across the conference table, assessing guarded. Hugh placed a manila folder on the table and opened it. Inside wedding photographs. Me in a white dress. Stellan in a tuxedo. November 2024 ceremony at a small venue in Charlottesville. 20 guests. My friend from work as maid of honor. Wayne and Lorraine Blackwell in the front row. Paloma stared at the images for 30 silent seconds. What is this? Her voice was controlled but thin. Why am I looking at wedding photos? Because Stellan Blackwell married Saskia Travers on November 15th, 2024, Hugh said calmly. Exactly 12 months ago, right before he met you. Paloma sat down slowly. He said you were his cousin, she said, finally looking at me. That you were resentful of him because he'd moved on with his life after helping you when you were between jobs. He told me you were a business contact, I replied. Someone interested in real estate investment opportunities through his firm. The woman I'd seen in Brent's photographs wasn't my enemy. She was the other woman Stellan had lied to, with equal calculation, just a different version of the same script. Silence filled the conference room. Paloma's hands rested flat on the table. She was processing, recalculating every interaction through this new framework. The ring, she said quietly. He told me he'd been saving for 2 years, that he knew from the moment we met. I opened my laptop and turned it toward her. The spreadsheet was already loaded, the line highlighted. Business loan, $45,000. Withdrawal date March 13th, 2025. I pulled up my phone and showed her the Instagram screenshot. You posted the ring photo March 14th, 1 day later. Paloma stared at the screen, at the timeline, at the mathematical precision of the fraud. I co-signed that loan, I added. He told me it was for business expansion. The money went into his account and came out 24 hours later as your engagement ring. 2 years of saving, Paloma repeated, her voice hollow. He said he'd been planning it since before we met. Some men just know. She looked up. That's what I told my friends when they asked how long we'd been together. 3 months felt fast, but he said he'd been preparing for years. He's been married to me for 13 months, I said. So 2 years of saving was mathematically impossible unless you count the year before he met me, which means he was planning to marry someone wealthy while he was still single, found me as financial support in between, and executed the ring purchase using my co-signed debt. Hugh's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, stood. I need to take this. 5 minutes. He left the conference room. Paloma and I sat across from each other in silence. 2 women in the same room, defrauded by the same man, discovering we'd been positioned as rivals in a story where we were actually companions in identical exploitation. She spoke first. The apartment, the one on Maple Street. He said it was his, that you were staying with him temporarily while you got back on your feet. I've been paying rent for 18 months, I said. I painted the walls. I chose the furniture. It's my home. He brought you there 17 times over 3 months, always Tuesday and Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Your night shift nights, Paloma said quietly. Yes. More silence. Paloma looked exhausted, not physically tired, but the exhaustion that comes from watching your understanding of reality collapse and reassemble into something uglier and more precise. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Neither did I at first, I replied. 3 weeks ago, I overheard a kitchen conversation and learned everything I'd believed was a performance. Paloma's expression shifted, recognition of that specific moment when you realize you've been living inside someone else's carefully constructed lie. What do you need from me? She asked finally. Paloma's question hung in the conference room air. What did I need from her? I need you to help me understand what he took from both of us, I said. Starting with the truck. I pulled out my bank statements and slid them across the table. $847 monthly for 11 months. I've been making payments on a 2022 Ford F-150, I said. The truck Stellan drives, the one he opened the door for you in Brent's photographs. Paloma's face shifted. That's his truck. He said he saved up and bought it outright. The registration? I said. What name is on it? She pulled out her phone and opened her photos, scrolling back. He showed me the registration when we first started dating, said it proved he was financially stable. She found the image and zoomed in. It's registered to Paloma Townsend. The conference room went quiet. You're paying $847 monthly for a truck registered in my name, Paloma said slowly, that I didn't know I owned. Hugh, who'd returned during this exchange, picked up the bank statements. The fluorescent lights in the conference room buzzed overhead as he studied each line, each month, each systematic extraction. How long? Hugh asked. 11 months, $9,317 total. Hugh made notes. Registration fraud. He used your money to purchase a vehicle, registered it in Paloma's name without her knowledge or consent, and maintained physical possession while both of you believed different ownership stories. Can we get the money back? I asked. Hugh's expression was careful. The vehicle legally belongs to Paloma. Stellan manipulated the registration, but changing that requires proving fraud, which we can do, but the truck itself is in Paloma's name. Recovery of your payments would be part of the larger civil case. I'd been paying nearly $1,000 monthly for 11 months to finance a vehicle I'd never own, registered to a woman I'd been told was a business contact driven by a man who was planning my convenient death on night shift drives home. There's more, Hugh said. He'd received a message on his phone and was reading it with the expression lawyers get when evidence exceeds expectations. Brent Wolfe is downstairs with Hayes Frost. They have forensic findings. Who's Hayes Frost? Paloma asked. I wondered how I'd trusted someone who'd planned this elaborate fraud for years, mapping every extraction, every lie, every systematic theft with the precision of someone who'd done this before or been taught by someone who had. Computer crimes attorney, Hugh replied. If Brent called him in, the findings are serious. 5 minutes later, Brent Wolfe and Hayes Frost entered the conference room. Hayes was 45, former federal prosecutor who'd specialized in cybercrimes before moving to private practice. He carried a laptop and wore the expression of someone delivering news that would change jurisdictions. Ms. Travers, Ms. Townsend. Hayes set the laptop on the conference table. Brent's laptop screen cast blue light across their faces as the forensic report loaded. The IT audit Brent commissioned revealed unauthorized access to Ms. Travers' email accounts spanning 6 months. 3 documented intrusions, all originating from the same IP address. He turned the laptop toward us. The report showed login timestamps, IP geolocation data accessed files. Someone accessed my email, I asked. Your personal Gmail, your work email, and your bank's online portal, Hayes confirmed. The intrusions occurred on dates that correlate with significant financial transactions. March 13th, the day of the business loan withdrawal. August 15th, the day the life insurance policy was signed. November 1st, 2 days after you opened the separate bank account. Before I reveal what Brent found in those server logs, are you still with me? Comment. A, if you think this stays in civil court, or B, if you think it goes federal, and add one short reason in 5 to 10 words. Because this next detail changes the entire jurisdiction. Please note the following contains some fictionalized elements added for narrative impact, though the core message remains. Who accessed them? Paloma asked. The IP address traces to a residence in Richmond, Virginia, Hayes said. 200 miles from here. The access occurred from a different state than where Ms. Travers resides, which elevates this from state-level unauthorized access to federal computer fraud. My hands went cold. Federal, I repeated. Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, Hayes explained. Unauthorized access to protected computers accessing financial institution information, crossing state lines in commission of the offense. If we can prove Stellan Blackwell was in Richmond on these dates and had access to the device at that IP address, we have federal charges, 10-year maximum prison sentence. Hugh leaned forward. Can you prove he was there? Brent opened his folder. Cross-referenced with Stellan's professional calendar from Indy's screenshots. March 13th, Richmond Real Estate Conference. August 15th, Richmond Continuing Education Seminar. November 1st, Richmond Client Meeting. All documented in his work calendar, all matching the intrusion dates exactly. The room absorbed this information in stages. Stellan hadn't just stolen money. He'd systematically accessed my private accounts from another state, timing each intrusion to coincide with major financial maneuvers, gathering intelligence to execute his extraction strategy while establishing federal criminal liability. What about the password protection? I asked. I never gave him my passwords. The audit shows he used a keylogger, Hayes said. Malware installed on your home computer that captured every keystroke, including passwords. The installation date traces back 14 months, 1 month after your wedding. 1 month after we married, he'd installed software to spy on every password I typed, every email I sent, every bank transaction I made. We have enough. Hayes said, finally closing the laptop. Unauthorized access crossing state lines, financial institution, information malware installation. This isn't a domestic dispute anymore. This is federal computer fraud. He placed a document on the table. Federal criminal complaint template. Blank spaces waiting for details we now possessed. The question, Hayes continued, is whether you want to pursue federal charges. Once we file, this becomes a federal case. FBI investigation, federal prosecutors' potential prison time, measured in years, not months. I looked at the blank complaint form. Then at Paloma, who was staring at the forensic report with the expression of someone realizing the man she'd been dating had committed federal crimes against the woman she'd thought was his cousin. Then at Hugh, who'd transformed my $800 retainer into a federal fraud case backed by the county's most powerful construction company. Hayes Frost closed the evidence folder and delivered the words that changed everything. We have enough for federal charges. Federal charges were one option, but first I needed to cut off his access to my money. Faye squeezed my hand as we pushed through the glass doors of First National Bank Thursday at noon. New account, I told the banker. Individual, no joint access. The account separation was irreversible the moment I signed. Every dollar I'd earn from Friday forward would flow into an account Stellan couldn't touch, couldn't monitor, couldn't extract from. This account is yours alone, the banker confirmed, handing me the signature card. Would you like to transfer funds? $3,200. But transfer it to this account. I slid Faye's account number across the desk. Faye's eyebrows raised slightly, but she understood creating a buffer Stellan couldn't trace if he started digging. The banker processed the transfer. $3,200 moved from the joint account into Faye's personal account where it would wait. One more thing, I said. Automatic transaction notifications on the joint account. Any withdrawal over $100 text alert immediately. Done. We walked out 20 minutes later. The December air was cold and clear. He won't see this coming, Faye whispered. That's the point. Every dollar I'd earn from Friday forward would go somewhere he couldn't touch. My salary, overtime, night shift differential, all flowing into an account he didn't know existed. Freedom tasted like ink on paper and terror in my throat. That evening, Stellan came home at 7:30. I was cooking pasta with marinara. Everything looked normal, felt normal like any Thursday evening. His phone buzzed as he walked through the door. I watched him check it, watched his expression shift from casual to confused to sharp. "Where's your paycheck?" Stellan asked, holding up his phone. "It didn't deposit to our account." "I opened a savings account," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing pulse. "For us, to start building toward a house fund. The paycheck went there automatically." The lie came easily. 12 months of his lies had taught me how. Stellan stared at me for 3 seconds that felt like 30. "You changed the direct deposit," he repeated. "For the savings account, I thought it would help us reach our goals faster." His eyes narrowed. Something in his expression changed, confidence cracking into suspicion for the first time. The easy charm suddenly looked like a mask he was struggling to keep in place. "Which bank?" "First National. Same as our joint account." "Do you want to see the paperwork?" I'd prepared for this. The folder in my work bag held legitimate savings account documents. Hugh had helped me create a real account with $50 opened under both names, separate from the individual account holding my actual salary. "No," Stellan said finally. "That's fine. Good thinking, actually." But his voice carried an edge it hadn't before. Uncertainty. The first crack in his certainty that I'd never question, never investigate, never protect myself. He went to the bedroom without kissing my forehead, without the usual casual touch. I stirred the pasta and listened to him make phone calls behind the closed door. His voice was low but urgent. I couldn't make out words, but the tone was clear. Something had shifted. Dinner was quiet. Stellan ate mechanically, checking his phone between bites. I asked about his day. He gave short answers. The easy conversation we'd maintained felt stilted, artificial, both of us performing, but no longer believing in the script. After dinner, he stayed up late, making more calls, checking bank balances, reviewing accounts with focused attention. I went to bed at 10, leaving him on the couch with his phone and calculations. At 11:30, he finally came to bed. He lay down without speaking, breathing wrong, not relaxed, not sleeping, just waiting in the dark. I waited until midnight, until his breathing shifted into genuine sleep. Then I got up quietly and went to my work bag in the closet. Hayes had given me a folder Wednesday afternoon after the federal charges discussion. Inside forensic accounting findings Brent had uncovered while tracking Stellan's financial movements. Hidden accounts, 3 of them. Bank statements showing systematic deposits spanning years long before he'd met me. Money flowing in from sources the documentation couldn't quite trace: cash deposits, wire transfers, from business accounts that didn't add up. Total across all 3 accounts, $89,400. The exact amount in my spreadsheet, the exact amount he owed me. He'd been hiding the money he'd stolen from me in accounts I hadn't known existed. Accounts he'd maintained for years, accounts that suggested I wasn't his first target, just his most recent. I closed the folder and placed it back in my work bag. Stellan slept 10 feet away, snoring softly now, exhausted from an evening of phone calls and calculations, trying to figure out why his wife had suddenly changed her direct deposit. He didn't know I'd found the hidden accounts. He didn't know about the promissory note he'd signed. He didn't know Paloma and I had met and compared notes. He didn't know federal charges were being prepared. He didn't know any of it. I stood in the dark closet holding documentation of his hidden $89,000 and thought about how accountants are trained to balance books to ensure every debit has a matching credit to make the numbers add up cleanly. Sleep well, Stellan, $89,000 plus interest. The hidden accounts stayed documented in my work bag while I prepared the final moves. 3 days later, Paloma Townsend stormed through the glass doors of Blue Ridge Transportation with fury written across her face. I was at my desk reviewing expense reports when the lobby commotion started. Faye looked up from her computer, then at me with alarm. Paloma marched straight to my desk, heels clicking on tile floor, attracting stares from every colleague in the accounting department. "Your cousin," Paloma hissed, voice low but vibrating with anger. "Your cousin threatened to tell everyone about us unless I pay him. $20,000 or he exposes everything to my father." The room went quiet, 8 accountants pretending not to listen. I stood up slowly, keeping my expression neutral. "Not here," I said quietly. "Conference room 2. I led her down the hallway, aware of eyes following us. Faye trailed behind, protective and concerned. We entered the small conference room and I closed the door. Paloma turned on me immediately. "How much does he want from you? Are you in on this blackmail together?" I leaned against the conference table and spoke quietly, each word deliberate. "Apartment 4B. Paloma's expression shifted slightly. "Tuesdays and Thursdays during my night shifts." Her face began to drain of color. "The truck on March 13th. Her hand went to her mouth. "The ring, $45,000, 1 day later." Paloma sat down heavily in the nearest chair. "He told you I knew," she breathed. "About us. He said you knew everything and were threatening him because you were jealous." "There is no cousin," I said. "There never was. I'm the wife he's been hiding from you while telling me you were a business contact. The person threatening you isn't my cousin. It's probably his father, Wayne, running another extraction scheme." Faye stood by the door, silent witness to the revelation unfolding. Paloma looked up at me. "You're the wife, the actual wife." 13 months, I confirmed. "Married November 15th, 2024. He met you 6 months ago while still living in the apartment I've been paying rent for." The apartment where Paloma stopped. "Where he brought me. 17 times. He said it was his place. That you were staying with him temporarily." "It's my home, my name on the lease, my furniture, my rent payments." Revenge tastes sweetest when your enemy's allies become yours. Paloma sat in that conference room chair, processing everything. The cousin story, the apartment lie, the timeline that made her the other woman in someone else's marriage, the blackmail from Wayne that had finally exposed the whole structure. "What do we do?" she asked finally. That night I met Paloma and Hugh at the law office. Hugh spread documents across his conference table. Standard divorce filing, asset division, debt acknowledgement, the promissory note Stellan signed. Clean, straightforward, legally airtight. When Paloma asked, "We schedule signing for next week. Neutral location witnesses present everything documented." I looked at the paperwork, then at Paloma. An idea had been forming since the conference room revelation. "We live stream it," I said. Hugh raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "Small device private chat, his biggest clients and partners only. Not public, just the professional network he's been performing for. If he signs quietly, only a few people watch him sign away everything he stole. If he makes a scene, he destroys himself in front of everyone who matters to his career." Hugh leaned back, considering. "That's aggressive." "He installed malware on my computer," I replied. committed federal computer fraud, brought another woman to my apartment 17 times, tried to position me for a convenient death via night shift accident. Aggressive is appropriate. Paloma pulled out her phone. I have every contact he ever used me to court. Vernon's business partners, real estate investors, construction executives, every person he met through my father's network. She scrolled through her contacts, selecting names. 237 people. I can create a private group chat in 5 minutes. 3 women who had all been used, now united. Hugh looked at both of us. If we do this, we need to be clear about purpose. This isn't revenge theater, it's documentation with witnesses and potential leverage if he attempts to contest any terms. He won't contest, I said. Not with Vernon Townsend's legal team backing the filing and 47 people watching. Wait, I corrected myself. 237 people watching. Hugh pulled out a small device from his desk drawer. Live stream camera. Used it for remote depositions during the pandemic. Battery life 4 hours, encrypted connection, private broadcast capability. He placed it on the conference table. The camera was barely larger than a phone, innocuous enough to sit on a shelf or bookcase without drawing attention. Where do we hold the signing? Paloma asked. Here, Hugh said. My conference room. Tuesday morning, December 15th. Stellan will receive notice Monday that we're filing, and he needs to appear for final signature on division of assets. Standard procedure. Nothing to make him suspicious. And the live stream, I asked. Camera positioned on the bookshelf behind where I'll sit. Broadcast goes to private chat Paloma creates containing the professional network. They'll receive a link 30 minutes before the signing begins. No advance warning to Stellan. Hugh looked at both of us. Last chance to reconsider. Once we activate this, there's no taking it back. 237 people will witness everything that happens in this room. I thought about 13 months of systematic extraction. The life insurance with underlined accident clauses. The hidden accounts totaling what he'd stolen. The apartment where he'd betrayed me 17 documented times. I'm certain, I said. Paloma nodded. So am I. Hugh pulled out 3 copies of the agreement. We signed Saskia Travers, Paloma Townsend, Hugh Vance. Accountant, heiress, lawyer. United against one man who'd underestimated all 3. I walked out of that law office Monday night with the live stream device in my purse and Paloma's contact list downloaded to my phone. 237 names, investors, partners, clients, would watch Stellan sign away everything. Stellan had no idea what was coming. Stellan's ignorance wouldn't last long once the evidence arrived in its final legally certified form. Hayes Frost slid the official IT report across his desk with the gravity of a man holding evidence that could end a life, or at least a freedom. Federal certification, Hayes said, tapping the seal embossed at the top of the document. This is no longer a marital dispute, this is federal computer fraud. I picked up the report. The language was technical but clear. 3 documented intrusions, dates, and timestamps, IP addresses, accessed files. The forensic trail was complete. 3 documented intrusions, Hayes continued, each one accessing protected financial information without authorization. The bonus data alone, $12,000 in compensation information, qualifies as financial institution data under federal statute. What's the exposure? I asked. Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Unauthorized access to protected computers accessing financial institution information crossing state lines, maximum 10 years federal prison. 10 years. The number sat in the air between us. The certification makes it admissible in federal court, Hayes explained. The question is timing. Do you want to file criminal charges now or preserve this as leverage? I thought about the live stream plan scheduled for next week. The divorce signing with 237 witnesses. The strategic choreography of revelation and consequence. Keep it ready to file, I replied, but not yet. I want him to think he's safe. Hayes nodded, understanding immediately. You want him relaxed when he walks into that signing. Exactly. He placed the report in a secure folder. I'll hold this until you give the word. Once we file, it's FBI jurisdiction, federal prosecutors, the full weight of criminal process. There's no walking it back. I understand. How long had Stellan believed I'd never discover the truth? How many months had he spent feeling secure in his superior planning, his careful manipulation, his certainty that the accountant wife would never audit her own life? There's one more piece, Hayes said. Rhett Ramsey contacted Hugh yesterday. He's ready to provide formal testimony. About the blackmail, about everything. The next day, I sat in Hugh Vance's conference room while Rhett Ramsey gave notarized testimony. The notary public sat at one end of the table, official seal ready. Hugh and Hayes witnessed from the sides. I sat across from Rhett, watching him prepare to break 4 years of forced silence. Rhett looked different than he had in the park weeks ago, still carrying guilt, but no longer carrying it alone. State your relationship to Stellan Blackwell, the notary prompted. We've been friends since college, Rhett said. Best man at his wedding, 13 months ago, November 15th. And you have information relevant to this divorce proceeding? Yes. The notary nodded. Rhett took a breath and began. He told me the plan in month 3, Rhett said, voice steady despite the weight of what he was revealing. Marry her, drain her, leave her. Those were his exact words over drinks one night when he thought I'd find it funny. I kept my expression neutral, but my hands were cold. He said he'd targeted her specifically, Rhett continued. Junior accountant, good income, trusting nature. He called her, Rhett's voice caught slightly. He called her the perfect mark. The notary wrote quickly, capturing every word. He also told me about Paloma, Rhett said. 3 months into the marriage. Said he'd met Vernon Townsend's daughter at a real estate conference and was upgrading the exit strategy. Made it sound like a business transaction. 4 years of friendship built on lies. Rhett's accident that Stellan had leveraged the blackmail that had kept Rhett silent through 13 months of systematic exploitation, the knowledge that his silence enabled harm to someone who'd done nothing wrong. His exact words, Rhett said, looking directly at me now. I still remember because he laughed when he said it. He told me Clara's too trusting to check the numbers. She'll never figure it out until I'm gone. Clara, my middle name, the name only family used, the name that appeared on my birth certificate, but not my driver's license, not my work badge, not any document Stellan should have had access to through normal marital interaction. How did he know that name? Hugh asked, catching it immediately. I don't know, Rhett replied. But he used it consistently when talking about her to me. Always, Clara, never Saskia, like he'd done research before even meeting her. The notary completed the documentation. Rhett signed. Hugh and Hayes witnessed. The testimony became legal record preserved, certified, admissible. Rhett walked out of that conference room looking unburdened, finally free of the secret he'd carried for 4 years. I stayed in my seat after everyone left holding the copy of Rhett's testimony. My eyes kept returning to one line, his exact words, Clara's too trusting to check the numbers. Stellan had known my middle name before we'd even started dating. Before the first dinner, before the first coffee, before any conversation where family names would have come up naturally. He'd researched me, investigated me, identified me as a target, and learned details a casual acquaintance would never know. The exploitation hadn't started on our wedding day or when we'd moved in together or when he'd first asked me to co-sign a loan. It had started before we'd ever met. Before he'd arranged that accidental meeting at the coffee shop near my office where he'd struck up a conversation about accounting software. Before he'd asked me to dinner with the charming smile and the easy laugh and the story about being new to Charlottesville and not knowing many people. All of it, every moment from the beginning, had been performance based on research, reconnaissance, targeted selection. Clara, too trusting to check the numbers. He'd been right about the trusting part for 12 months at least. But he'd been catastrophically wrong about the numbers. Because I'd checked every single one. I'd documented every transaction, every lie, every systematic extraction. I'd built a spreadsheet that would make any forensic accountant proud. I'd gathered evidence that spanned federal computer fraud, financial exploitation, insurance fraud, and systematic manipulation. And I'd done it all while letting him believe I was still Clara, too trusting, too naive, too focused on making our marriage work to notice he was methodically dismantling my financial security. I read the line one more time. Clara's too trusting to check the numbers. Too trusting to check numbers, I almost laughed. The laughter didn't last. Paloma arrived at Hugh's office the next morning with evidence that made everything worse. Paloma Townsend's hands shook as she placed the ultrasound receipt on Hugh Vance's desk. My father was furious, Paloma said. Called me irresponsible for getting pregnant before marriage. Said I was throwing away everything he'd built. I tried to tell him it wasn't real, but he'd already seen the receipt Stellan sent him. Hugh picked up the document. Standard medical receipt format. Clinic letterhead. Patient ID number. Service first trimester ultrasound. Date October 3rd. Amount $350. Stellan sent this to Vernon, I asked. 2 weeks ago, with a note saying he wanted to do right by me, asking my father to support us getting married quickly. Hugh dialed the clinic number on speaker. Women's Health Center, how may I help you? I'm calling to verify a patient record. Patient ID number 743921, service date October 3rd. Typing on the other end. I'm not showing any record for that patient ID number. Could you verify the name Paloma Townsend? Longer pause. We have no patient by that name in our system. Our patient ID format is different, and we don't provide itemized receipts for that service. Someone may have created a fraudulent document. Hugh hung up. He forged medical documents, I said, to control both our families at the same time. Paloma stared at the fake receipt. My father believed it, called me disappointing. All because Stellan wanted to pressure faster marriage support using a pregnancy that never existed. Hugh placed the receipt in an evidence folder. Medical fraud, forgery. This adds another charge. That evening I made dinner. Stellan came home at 7 relaxed. He thought the crisis had passed. We sat at the small dining table. Pasta, the same meal I'd been cooking the night I'd changed my direct deposit. His fork froze halfway to his mouth. 2 weeks, then we're free, Stellan said casually. I set down my fork carefully. Free, I repeated. The consolidation finally goes through. We can start fresh. I looked at him across the table. The man who'd researched my middle name before we'd met. Who'd installed malware 1 month after our wedding. Who'd been planning this moment longer than a future with me. You said something similar on our anniversary, I said, voice calm. In the kitchen, November 15th. You told Wayne and Lorraine drain the account before she notices. Stellan's hand stopped. You also said she was never my class. Wayne told you to leave lipstick marks visible because women like me blame ourselves first. Lorraine confirmed the medication money, $1,200 monthly for vitamins. The color drained from his face. I have every word documented, I said. Rhett was in the hallway. He provided notarized testimony 2 days ago. 7 years of lies condensed into 847 rows of truth. I also have federal IT forensics showing you accessed my email accounts from Richmond 3 times. March 13th, August 15th, November 1st. Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. 10-year maximum sentence. Stellan started to speak. I held up one hand. I have the life insurance policy you filed in my name. August 2025. Accident clauses highlighted. Night shift workers, single vehicle incidents, fatigue-related crashes. All targeting my Tuesday and Thursday schedule. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. I have the promissory note you signed acknowledging the debt. Your signature 6 times, legally binding. I stood and walked to my work bag, pulled out my laptop, returned to the table. Monday morning. I said, opening the computer. 3 files get submitted. Promissory note to civil court, insurance fraud to police, computer intrusion to FBI. Unless you sign the divorce terms Hugh prepared, unconditional, immediate, complete. I turned the laptop screen toward him. The spreadsheet loaded, 847 rows. Column A, date. Column B, transaction. Column C, amount. Column D, evidence. Column E, witness. Column F, legal statute. Column G, criminal versus civil. Column H, notes. Every transaction cataloged, every lie documented, every conversation recorded, every statute violated, every witness cross-referenced. 13 months of systematic extraction transformed into a prosecutorial roadmap. Stellan stared at the screen, face white. How long, he whispered. Since the night you left me in that hallway holding laundry. Since I heard you laugh about draining the account. Since Wayne coached manipulation strategy. Since Lorraine confirmed fake medication. Since you said I was never your class. I scrolled down. The rows kept going. November, October, September. Back to our wedding day. Every extraction, every lie, every crime. You installed the keylogger 1 month after we married, I said. I found it 3 weeks ago, left it active, let you think you were monitoring me while Hayes Frost documented every federal statute you violated. Stellan's hands shook. You researched my middle name before we met, I continued. You told Rhett you'd targeted me specifically. Junior accountant, good income, trusting nature. You called me the perfect mark. I zoomed to the bottom. Final totals, final calculations, final liability summary. You were right about one thing, I said. I was trusting. For exactly 12 months and 15 days. Then I became what I should have been from the beginning, an accountant who checks every number, documents every discrepancy, and corrects every fraudulent entry. I turned the laptop screen toward Stellan one more time. 847 rows. Every transaction, every lie, every quote, every crime. All time-stamped, cross-referenced, legally documented, ready for filing. I don't bluff, I document. Stellan left without a word. He stood at the dining room table for 17 seconds. I counted, staring at the spreadsheet's title page like it might rearrange itself into something less damning. Then he walked out. The door closed with a soft click that felt louder than any slam. Rhett called at 6 the next morning. Stellan sat in his car outside my house for 2 hours last night, he said. Just parked across the street, didn't get out, didn't knock, just sat there. What did you do? Called the cops. They ran his plates, told him to move along. Rhett's voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. Saskia, I've got kids. If he comes back, he won't, I said. He's desperate, not dangerous. But I didn't know that. Not really. I'd spent 12 months learning who Stellan actually was, and desperation had a way of rewriting people. I learned later what happened after he left my house. Indy told me she'd heard it from Chloe, a neighbor who'd been near Wayne and Lorraine Blackwell's house when Stellan arrived. Wayne Blackwell was a retired insurance adjuster who calculated human failure with the same cold precision he'd once assessed property damage. Lorraine Blackwell was a woman who communicated disappointment through strategic silence. Stellan had called them both mom and dad his entire life, but they'd raised Chloe, not him, and the distinction had always mattered. He'd shown up at their house Thursday night, the spreadsheet still in his hands. She's trying to destroy me, he'd said. Wayne had looked at the spreadsheet for less than a minute. No, he'd said. You destroyed yourself. She's just presenting the invoice. I need a lawyer. You need to accept that you lost. Wayne had handed the spreadsheet back. You let her get too close to the numbers. That's not her fault. That's yours. Lorraine hadn't said anything. She'd just refilled her coffee and looked out the window. Clara had texted me later. They didn't offer him a dime, not even sympathy. The entry twist I'd expected Stellan's parents to rally around him. Instead, they'd calculated the cost of defending the indefensible and decided he wasn't worth the investment. Hugh came over Friday afternoon with the promissory note. 6 signatures, he said, spreading the pages across my kitchen counter. Indy, Rhett, Brent, Vernon, Hayes, and you. Fully notarized, fully enforceable. How much does he owe me? $89,400 in documented expenses, plus statutory interest from the dates of each transaction. That brings it to $93,160 as of today. Hugh's smile was sharp. 12 months of being underestimated just became his most expensive mistake. I looked at the note. My signature sat at the bottom, black ink on cream paper. I'd signed it December 11th, 3 days ago. It felt like years. Can he contest it? He can try. But he'd have to prove the expenses weren't legitimate, and your spreadsheet makes that impossible. Every charge cross-references a bank statement, a receipt, or a credit card transaction. He's not fighting you. He's fighting math. Good, I said. Let him fight math. Ruth Webb came to my door Friday evening. She was 72, sharp-eyed, and owned the apartment building where Stellan had been meeting Paloma since March. I'd met her exactly once when Indy and I had photographed the truck in the parking garage. I owe you an apology, Ruth said. I blinked. For what? I knew. She handed me a USB drive. I've owned that building for 30 years. I know who lives there and who doesn't. Your husband doesn't live there, but he's been visiting every Tuesday and Thursday night since March. I stared at the USB. What's on this? 90 days of hallway security camera footage. 17 documented instances of him bringing that woman into Unit 4C. Ruth's voice was steady. Timestamps match your night shifts. He thought he was clever. He wasn't. I took the USB. My hands didn't shake. They should have. Why are you giving this to me? Because I raised 3 daughters, Ruth said. And because men like your husband think older women are invisible. We're not. We're just patient. The exit twist: I'd spent weeks gathering evidence, building a case, documenting every lie. Ruth had been doing the same thing quietly from her apartment manager's office. There's something else, Ruth said. Unit 4C is for sale. The tenant's moving to Portland. It's 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, parking included. I'm offering it to you first. I looked at her. The apartment where he thought he was safe, Ruth corrected. The apartment where he underestimated a 72-year-old woman with a security camera and a long memory. You could own it. You could decide what happens there next. I thought about Stellan walking into that building every Tuesday and Thursday, confident that no one was watching. I thought about Paloma, who'd believed she was stealing someone's husband without consequences. I thought about 12 months of night shifts and empty beds and lies that had felt like love. How much? I asked. Ruth named a price. It was fair, more than fair. I'll take it, I said. I learned about Stellan's collapse the way I'd learned everything else that year in pieces, from people who'd finally stopped protecting him. The call from Townsend Construction's legal representative came at 9:47 on Thursday morning, December 14th. Dale Merrick was Townsend Construction's chief legal counsel who delivered professional terminations with clinical precision. Rhett told me about it later. He'd been copied on the email confirmation. All corporate credit cards have been frozen and you've been removed from our authorized agent list effective immediately, Dale had said. Stellan had stammered something about Vernon about the project's about 18 months of work. The $2.3 million project commission will not be paid. Mr. Townsend considers the relationship terminated. One phone call. 18 months of access gone. Vernon had built his empire by identifying threats early and eliminating them completely. Stellan had become a threat. I was at Hugh's office when Rhett called to tell me. Vernon didn't just fire him, Rhett said. He erased him, like he never existed. Vernon Townsend had eliminated Stellan from his business empire with the efficiency of a man removing a line item from a budget. Stellan called 5 numbers after Dale hung up. Paloma busy signal. He tried twice, both times busy. Wayne answered on the 4th ring. I told you Tuesday. You're on your own. Click. Rhett rang 6 times, went to voicemail. Rhett was sitting across from me when Stellan's name appeared on his screen. He declined the call without a word. Vernon straight to the assistant. Mr. Townsend is unavailable and has asked that you not call again. Me. I watched my phone light up from across Hugh's desk, Stellan's name glowing on the screen. I let it ring. All 6 rings. Then silence. 5 calls, 5 rejections. The network he'd spent a decade building had collapsed in under 10 minutes. Every relationship he'd cultivated, every connection he'd leveraged, every person he'd used, they'd all calculated the same math Wayne had. Stellan wasn't worth the investment anymore. He's calling everyone, Rhett said, checking his voicemail. 3 messages in the last hour. All the same, he needs help, he needs money, he needs someone to fix this. Did you listen to them? 30 seconds of the first one. That was enough. I thought about 12 months earlier, Stellan confident, charming, always 3 steps ahead. Now he was calling his way through a contact list that had already deleted him. He went to his parents' house Friday morning. I know because Chloe texted me Chloe's here. But they're not. I called her. What did you mean? The house is locked. His car's in the driveway, but theirs is gone. The neighbors said they loaded up at 6 this morning and left. I asked Chloe to stay on the line. I called Rhett on speaker. Wayne emptied the joint savings last night, Rhett said. $23,000. Withdrew it at 4:30 yesterday afternoon, 6 hours after Vernon's lawyer called Stellan. The timing wasn't coincidence. Wayne had spent 40 years assessing risk for an insurance company. He knew how to calculate when a situation was about to detonate. He'd seen Vernon cut Stellan off, understood what came next, and executed his own extraction plan. They calculated the escape timing perfectly, Hugh said quietly. He'd been listening from his desk. Before Stellan's collapse became their liability. Chloe sent me a photo 20 minutes later. Stellan sitting on the front steps of Wayne and Lorraine's house, head in his hands, surrounded by 4 days of uncollected newspapers. The December cold had turned the morning gray and bitter. The student becomes the lesson. Duh! I met Clara for coffee that afternoon. She looked exhausted. I knocked on the car window, she said, asked if he was okay. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me for a second, then said, "They're gone." Did he say where? He didn't know. Wayne didn't tell anyone, just loaded the car and left. She stirred her coffee without drinking it. Stellan kept saying, "He taught me this. He taught me how to do this," over and over. I understood what she meant. Wayne had raised Stellan not biologically, but practically. Every manipulation technique, every strategy for extracting value, every lesson in using people and disappearing before consequences hit. Stellan had learned it all from Wayne, and now Wayne had used it on him. The exit twist. Wayne and Lorraine had fled with their savings before Stellan's collapse destroyed them. 2. Executing the same calculated abandonment they'd taught him to perfect. What did you tell him? I asked. Nothing. What could I say? Clara looked at me. He destroyed you. He destroyed Paloma's marriage. He destroyed Vernon's trust. And the person who taught him how to destroy things just destroyed him. I thought about the promissory note sitting in Hugh's office, $93,000. About the apartment I was buying, the same apartment where Stellan had thought he was safe. About the spreadsheet, the evidence, the 12 months of documentation. Wayne had taught Stellan that people were resources to be extracted and discarded, that relationships were leverage, that consequences could be outrun if you moved fast enough. But Wayne had also taught him something else. Something Stellan was only learning now: everyone's resources run out eventually. Everyone becomes a liability, and no one outruns consequences forever, not even the people who teach you how to run. Stellan sat on his parents' front steps as the December cold seeped through his coat. Wayne had taught him every manipulation technique since childhood: use people, extract value, disappear before consequences hit. He raised a son to use people, then used the son. The complete collapse of Stellan's world left him frozen in the bitter winter air, completely out of options. $340,000 appeared in my account at 7:12 on the morning of December 17th. My 30th birthday. I was at First National Bank when the notification came through. The banker, a woman named Margaret, who'd worked there 23 years, pulled up the transaction and smiled. Trust disbursement on 30th birthday when you're old enough to know what you want. She read from my grandmother's instructions. 5 years ago, my grandmother had established the trust. 5 years before Stellan. 5 years before the lies, the pharmacy receipts, the affair, the fraud. She'd died 3 years ago, but she'd planned this moment with surgical precision. 30 years old, financially independent, old enough to know what I wanted. My grandmother had mapped my financial freedom half a decade in advance, as if she'd known I'd need it exactly now. I called Ruth from the bank parking lot. Ruth, it's Saskia. I'm wiring the apartment deposit today. Full cash offer. I'll have the paperwork ready by Monday. I transferred $48,000 at 9:15. The apartment where Stellan had thought he was safe, where 17 Tuesday and Thursday nights had been documented on security footage, where Paloma had believed she was stealing someone's husband without consequences, it was mine. Every number in every column finally belonged to me alone. Hugh called that afternoon. Settlement conference is Friday, December 20th at 10 a.m. He's required to attend. Will he show? He doesn't have a choice. Dale Merrick confirmed no show means automatic judgment in your favor for every line item. I thought about the promissory note, the spreadsheet, the federal IT report, the notarized testimony. 12 months of documentation sitting in 3-ring binders with numbered tabs and highlighted sections. He'll show, I said. He still thinks he can talk his way out of this. Hugh's laugh was sharp. Then he still doesn't understand who he's been underestimating. Freedom has a dollar amount, $340,000. It meant apartment ownership, legal representation, the ability to walk away from a night shift job and choose something better. It meant never needing Stellan's approval, Stellan's credit cards, Stellan's carefully controlled access to money that had always been partly mine. I spent December 18th and 19th reviewing every document with Hugh and Vernon. The terms were non-negotiable. Promissory note, $89,400, plus statutory interest, total $93,160. Truck title transferred to Paloma Townsend, immediately full ownership, no lien. Joint bank accounts liquidated, 60-40 split in my favor based on contribution records. The house listed immediately, proceeds divided after mortgage payoff. Stellan's signature required on every page. He's going to object, Vernon said. He'll call it punitive, unfair, vindictive. Let him, I said. I have 47 people who need to hear what vindictive actually sounds like. Friday morning arrived cold and bright. I got to Hugh's office at 9:30. Vernon was already there. Dale Merrick arrived at 9:45, briefcase in hand, expression neutral. Stellan walked in at 9:58. He looked smaller than I remembered, exhausted, unshaven, wearing a suit that needed pressing. He sat across the conference table and didn't meet my eyes. Hugh placed the settlement documents in front of him. 47 pages, numbered tabs, a signature line on each page. Stellan read the first page, then the second. His jaw tightened. "These terms are ridiculous. I'm not signing this," he said, standing from the table. Hugh reached into his briefcase and pulled out an iPad. He set it on the table screen facing Stellan. The red recording light blinked. 47 people are watching right now, Hugh said quietly, including 6 of your biggest partners: Vernon Townsend, Rhett Brent Wolf, Hayes Frost, Indy Fay. Also watching Dale's senior partners, 3 real estate board members, your direct supervisor, and 17 other professionals you've worked with over the last decade. Hugh turned the iPad screen towards Stellan. I could see the viewer count: 47. All names visible in the participant list. "They've been watching since 9:45, Hugh continued. "They've seen every document. They've heard every number, and they're waiting to see what you'll do next." 47 professionals were watching Stellan's humiliation live, documenting his defeat the way I'd documented his fraud. Stellan looked at the screen, at the names, at the number 47 glowing in the corner. He sat back down. The room was silent except for the sound of pages turning. Stellan signed every page without looking up once. His hand shook on page 12, the promissory note acknowledgement. It steadied by page 20. By page 40, he was just moving through motions, a man executing his own surrender. I watched his signature appear 47 times, each one slightly different, the S in Stellan growing smaller, the final L in Blackwell bleeding into the margin by the last page. Dale Merrick witnessed. Hugh notarized. Vernon photographed each signed page with his phone. Stellan stood when it was finished. He looked at me for the first time since entering the room. "I hope you're satisfied," he said. I thought about 12 months of lies. About Paloma. About the pharmacy receipts, the forged ultrasound, the truck registered in my name, the affair apartment, the federal fraud. About Ruth's security footage and Hayes's IT report and Rhett's blackmail confession. "I'm not satisfied," I said. "I'm documented." Stellan left without another word. Hugh closed the iPad as the live stream ended. 47 viewers, partners, investors, contacts who'd believed Stellan's polished performance for years. 47 people watched him become what he pretended not to be. The live stream closed. 47 professionals had watched Stellan sign away everything: his credibility, his network, his carefully constructed image. Now they'd all seen what I'd documented for 12 months. Stellan Blackwell stepped into the law office hallway holding divorce papers that had just dismantled his entire life. He stood by the elevator flipping through the pages like he might find an escape clause buried in the legal language. Hugh had drafted every paragraph to be airtight. Vernon had reviewed every number. Dale Merrick had witnessed every signature. There was no escape clause. I followed him into the hallway. I had one more thing to show him. "You missed page 38, I said. He turned. His face was gray, exhausted. The charm he'd worn for a decade had finally worn through. "What's on page 38? Property deed filing." He flipped to it. I watched his eyes scan the document: property address unit 4C, the building where he'd been staying since I'd locked him out of our house on November 16th. His finger stopped on the owner line. New owner Saskia Mitchell. The entry twist: he'd been living in my apartment, my property, my deed, my tenant for 11 days without knowing it. "You bought it," he said. Not a question, a realization. "I closed on December 9th. You've been my tenant for 11 days. He stared at the page, at my name typed in neat legal font next to the address where he'd thought he still had control, where he'd brought Paloma 17 times, where Ruth's security camera had documented every Tuesday and Thursday night, where he'd felt safe. For the first time, his face held no charm, no calculation, only the realization he'd been in the wrong place from the start. Stellan looked at me, really looked, maybe for the first time in years, not at the wife he could manipulate, not at the accountant he could outsmart, at the person who'd owned the space he'd been occupying before he even knew she existed in his calculations. "Why?" he asked. "Because you taught me that location matters," I said. "You taught me that controlling the space someone occupies gives you power over them. You taught me that ownership is the only position that can't be argued away." Ownership is the ultimate answer to control. I'd learned that from him. From 12 months of watching him control access to money, to information, to the truth about where he spent his Tuesday and Thursday nights. He'd controlled the space I occupied, our house, our accounts, our marriage. So I'd bought the space he occupied. And now he understood what it felt like to live somewhere that belonged to someone else. The conference room door opened behind us. Paloma Townsend stepped into the hallway. She looked different than she had in Brent's surveillance photos. Older, maybe, or just more real. She wore a gray suit, her dark hair pulled back, no expression on her face that I could read. Stellan froze. "You were," he started. "In the other conference room," Paloma said. Her voice was steady. "Watching through the glass partition. The exit twist she'd witnessed the entire signing. Every signature, every number, every clause that dismantled the man who'd promised her a future while systematically destroying mine. Hugh had arranged it, he'd told me yesterday. She has a right to see this, he'd said. She needs to understand what he cost both of you." I hadn't objected. Paloma walked past Stellan without looking at him. She stopped next to me. Her hand rested on mine for exactly 1 second, no words, no explanation needed. Her fingers were cold, mine probably were too. Silence speaks louder than any testimony. We'd both been used. We'd both believed versions of Stellan that turned out to be performances. We'd both lost time, money, trust, futures we'd planned around a man who'd been planning around us. The difference was that I'd documented mine. I'd built a case. I'd turned 12 months of exploitation into 47 pages of legal consequences. Paloma had watched me do it. "Thank you," she said. 2 words. Quiet. Then she turned and walked toward the stairs. Stellan stood in the hallway holding the signed papers. Page 38 still open to the property deed with my name on it. No apartment to return to, not really. Not now that he knew I owned it. No network to call, not after 47 people had watched him sign away his credibility. No parents to bail him out. They'd fled with their savings before his collapse could destroy them. I thought about November 15th, 2024. The visa bill, the pharmacy charge, the moment I'd started counting. I thought about the spreadsheet, the 847 rows, the phone calls, the photographs, the security footage, the federal IT report, the notarized testimony. I thought about Rhett's words from months ago. You don't fight him, you document him until there's nothing left to fight. There was nothing left. Us. I walked back into the conference room. Hugh was packing his briefcase. Vernon was on his phone. Dale Merrick had already left. "It's done," Hugh said. "It's done," I agreed. I gathered my copies of the settlement, my set of 47 pages, each one numbered and initialed and notarized. I put them in my bag next to my keys, the keys to my apartment, the one where Stellan had been staying, the one he'd have to vacate within 30 days per the lease terms Ruth had written. I walked back into the hallway. Stellan was gone. The elevator showed floor 3 descending. Paloma had already disappeared down the stairs. I felt nothing I hadn't already accounted for. I had accounted for everything. Every number, every conversation, every transaction, and every single moment that would inevitably lead to this exact crossroads. Yet the sterile equations of forensic accounting never quite prepare you for the immense crushing silence that settles over a room once the mathematics of revenge are finally completed. I stood by the large, tinted fourth-floor window of Hugh Vance's law office, watching Stellan Blackwell emerge onto the street below as a gray December rain began to mist over downtown Charlottesville. He looked incredibly small from this height. He stood frozen on the sidewalk, clutching a small suitcase in one hand and the heavy manila document envelope containing 47 signed pages of total surrender in the other. He didn't move toward his vehicle. He just stood there under the bleak winter sky, staring down at his phone as the screen cast a pale, desperate glow against his face. From 4 floors up, he had finally shrunk to his true dimensions. It had simply taken this long and required this much distance for the stark reality of his scale to show through. Beneath the layers of manufactured charm, the practiced confidence, and the carefully curated image of a rising real estate mogul, he was nothing more than a petty con artist who had run out of marks. Through the glass, I watched him scroll frantically through his phone, likely searching for a single lifeline. I knew that contact list inside out. I had paid the monthly service bill for that device for 3 years, never realizing the account was fully registered in my name, while locked tightly behind his private password. I knew exactly what he was seeing as he scrolled. Wayne gone. Fled with Lorraine and $23,000 of liquidated joint savings before their son's impending collapse could become their financial liability. Paloma completely blocked. She had witnessed his true nature through the conference room glass and vanished, Rhett refusing to answer. Not after Stellan had spent 2 hours stalking his family from a parked car across the street. Vernon Townsend, his assistant, had made the boundary clear. No further communication would be tolerated. Then there was me. I stood 40 feet above him, my own phone resting silently in my coat pocket. I watched him, but I had absolutely no intention of calling. No one was calling him. No one was coming to rescue him. There was no social or professional network left to catch his fall. He was standing at his true diminished size for the first time in 7 years. I turned away from the window and drove back to Maple Street. I went home to my apartment, the exact same unit I now legally owned, the space where Stellan had unknowingly been my tenant for the last 11 days. Ruth Webb had personally overseen the locksmith that afternoon. I held the new keys tightly in my palm. My name was stamped clearly on the deed as the sole owner, and a formal 30-day eviction notice was now pinned securely to the front door of Unit 4C. I sat down at my small desk in the corner of the room and booted up my laptop. The master Excel file was still open. What I paid, what he said. 847 rows of unassailable data. Every transaction categorized, every lie cross-referenced, every calculation beautifully completed. I opened a fresh tab in the workbook and titled it Final Balance Sheet. With a steady hand, I typed out the final ledger lines. Debit $91,847. Promissory note principal accrued, statutory interest, and documented marital fraud. Credit $0. Net amount, due $91,847. Accounting. I realized in that quiet room is not just the process of documentation, it is the ultimate cold delivery of justice. I had learned that fundamental truth in the grueling 12 months that stretched between our wedding day and this very evening. I had learned that numbers possess no empathy, that receipts never suffer from amnesia, and that a meticulously maintained spreadsheet can completely dismantle a fraudulent life. Ironically, I had learned the value of leverage from Stellan himself. He had taught me that precision is the only thing that matters, that documentation is absolute power, and that the individual who controls the numbers ultimately controls the entire narrative. He had simply never expected his quiet junior accountant wife to run a comprehensive audit on him. I opened my secure email client and composed a final message. In the subject line, I typed FY Final Year Settlement. In the body of the email, I wrote just a single unvarnished sentence. You thought you were the director in that kitchen, Stellan, but I always held the budget, and the final cut belongs to me. I attached the certified PDF of the final balance sheet and clicked send at precisely 9 p.m. The email delivered instantly. There was no bounce back error, no frantic auto reply, just absolute beautiful silence. I closed the laptop and went to sleep. The following morning, December 21st, exactly 1 week before Christmas, the apartment was flooded with sharp winter sunlight. I stood in the kitchen making coffee, listening to the familiar water rhythm. This was the exact same kitchen where Wayne Blackwell had casually mapped out my psychological destruction over dinner. The same space where Lorraine had used strategic winces of fake back pain to extract thousands of dollars for cheap vitamin supplements. The same room where Stellan had proudly declared to his parents that I was never in his class. It made me wonder what changes faster, the physical room itself, or the way you choose to stand inside it. The physical layout was completely identical. The morning sun streamed through the east-facing window, cutting across the countertop at the exact same angle it had for months. The coffee maker was the same basic model I had purchased on clearance because Stellan claimed the premium brands were an unnecessary waste of money. The granite counters were the same, the ivory paint I had rolled onto the walls was the same, and the linoleum floor tiles were completely unchanged. Yet everything about the space had completely transformed, not because the walls had moved, but because I had changed how I occupied them. Stellan had actually been right about class. I would never belong to his class. His class belonged to a world where superficial charm substituted for character, where predatory manipulation was viewed as a legitimate strategy, and where the systematic exploitation of a partner was celebrated as smart business. His class was the kind that taught children how to bleed people dry, and then abandoned those same children the moment their utility expired. I would never be that class. I chose accountability. My phone buzzed against the counter. It was a text from Faye. Coffee or a total victory lap? Mimosas at 10. I smiled and typed back, let's do 11, I'm finishing my own cup first. I drank it by choice entirely on my own terms, standing in a kitchen that I owned in an apartment that belonged to me, financed by money that was legally mine. The trust disbursement from my grandmother, the court-ordered settlement from my marriage, and the deed to the property were all balanced cleanly in my favor. Every single number, in every single column, finally added up to my freedom. I had spent a year documenting his fraud, and now I was finally standing inside the balanced ledger of my new life. And to you listening to my story, remember this. Silence is not the same as peace, and patience is not the same as weakness. Looking back, my biggest mistake wasn't trusting Stellan for 7 years. It was believing that loyalty meant accepting less than I deserved. I thought being understanding meant ignoring the signs of husband betrayal. I thought being patient meant letting someone else have financial control over my future. Don't make my mistake. When you see the signs, don't look away. When the numbers don't add up, start counting for yourself. The lesson I learned is this: document everything, not out of paranoia, but out of self-respect. Financial control isn't about having more money, it's about knowing exactly where yours goes. When someone uses your trust as a weapon, documentation becomes your shield. I believe God put me through this journey to show me my own strength. The spreadsheet didn't just track fraud, it tracked my transformation from someone who accepted husband betrayal to someone who demanded accountability. Trust yourself enough to verify, love yourself enough to protect what's yours. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to document everything to protect yourself from financial control? Drop a comment below. Your story might help someone else find their courage. If this resonated with you, please share it. And if you're new here, subscribe to herdramastories for more true-to-life lessons. Thank you for staying until the very end. Before you go, remember some details have been fictionalized for storytelling and privacy. Any resemblance to specific individuals is coincidental. What matters most is the lesson, and I hope it stays with you. God bless you.